I do want to play this. Dan Campbell, this is something I thought was super interesting. He spoke to NFL Network about how he determines Campbell guys, or how they determine who fits and who doesn't.
The grit guys.
Yeah, the gritty players. The grittiest of the grittiest. And I have that video here, and we could play it and kind of react to it. And there's a lot of people on social media, because this was posted by Steve Weich, I believe, who he's a chief national reporter for NFL Network. And a lot of people were responding and kind of disagreeing with his philosophy. What are you laughing at?
Zach just kill. When he's horny, we hear the dude like subtly hit the horn in the middle of a show on the second one time. Announcement. The horn. Sorry, that you asked what was. I was just laughing about the situation.
Oh no, that's fair. That's fair.
You should have asked that.
Here's the video. A lot of people had a problem with what Dan said because they disagree. Not Lions fans, just NFL fans in general. But here's what Dan had to say when they asked him just about the draft philosophy.
So it's draft season now. This is where you guys have done work. How exciting of a time is it for you? Because you don't do things traditionally, but like you said earlier, you get guys with a certain character, and you guys have nailed it the past 2 years. Like, how excited are you and Brad Holmes to be in this part, to build off these last 2 drafts you've had?
We love draft season. Now, let me start with this. Brad, this credit to Brad. Brad does an unbelievable job. And the way that he grinds through tape, the way that his staff grinds through tape, and the years that they go back, 2-3 years, and to really get a snapshot of what this guy is. So man, that credit goes to him. But we were very excited to add on to what we have here, because we do. You already mentioned it earlier. We love the guys that we have in this locker room. We love the talent that we've acquired, but the type of talent, the type of character that comes with it. So we're looking for the next batch, man, that fits. And look, there'll be some players in here that are really good players, but they just don't fit us. And that's okay. That's okay. But we got to find the right guys for us.
Hey, he said there'll be some good players. That's okay. That's okay, man. They're good players, man. But they just don't fit in our culture.
Kool-Aid McKinstry's.
Well, Jalen Carter would be the notable one because, that one, he's a good player, just didn't fit in the culture, which, again, I understand. Like, even though I was pushing, I understand. I do, and it's worked for him. So who am I to disagree with that philosophy? And you look at this draft and some guys that kind of fit the mold as, like, Dan Campbell guys or Brad Holmes guys, Lions guys. That's why when we do these mocks, they mean absolutely nothing because we don't know these players on a personal level. Only NFL teams that meet with them in person, over some sort of Zoom meeting, whatever it is, you meet with that person, you get to talk with that player. You're going to determine if they're the right fit. I mean, he mentioned Brad Holmes goes back and looks at the last 2 to 3 years of tape to see where they develop. Like, if a player's getting better every single year, you're like, okay, this guy is on a pretty good trajectory, or if he regresses, or if there's still more potential there, all that stuff matters. Yeah. To Coach Walk, Malik Willis, I can confirm, not a Campbell guy, but that's a side note. Were you guys, just to kind of revisit this philosophy, does it make you kind of look at the draft? It's hard. It becomes harder to kind of break down draft players that are going to be drafted in the NFL and be like, is this guy a Campbell guy? Is this a guy a Campbell guy? That's why I love having Scott and Russell Brown, Scott Bischoff, guys that are so familiar with the draft process, that know these players, not on a personal level like the Lions, but just kind of know and watch tape and understand, like, okay, this guy fits the culture.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of not Lions fans, but NFL fans being like, yeah, but that's not the way it should be. You should draft the best players. Clearly, they don't know what the Lions have been building because they've been doing a pretty good job doing it this way.
Look what they did last year. They didn't care. Like, Jahmyr Gibbs at 12. Like, they went off script completely. I think this is where it comes from too. We've had this conversation a lot, and we've broke this down a lot. I think, like, the best franchises who go out there and compete consistently, the 49ers, the Steelers, like the Ravens, I feel like it's a broken record saying this, but it's just like these elite franchises, they just go get the guys that they need in their building. Like the Lions, like Brad and Dan, they get their guys, but they built their culture from like the ground up, and they've made it to where now they can bring their guys in and be comfortable, and they can win football games with guys that aren't as athletic, as this, as that, because they know what their brand of football is, if that makes sense to you guys. And you look at teams that go out there like the Chicago Bears, Jeff. We had this conversation. I know you didn't change, but we've had this conversation a couple months ago with the Bears about like they're going out there and buying a team essentially. They're going out, like there's teams that go out there and buy players. They go just get the best players they can and try and put a team together of like Avengers, and it just doesn't, it never works out and nothing comes out of it. Brad and Dan, they're like, we want our guys. We're going to go through this draft process. We're going to break this down. We're going to talk to, you hear people talk, like we're going to go talk to their teachers. We're going to go talk to everyone we need to talk to. We want the right guys in the building, and they've like lived off of that, and it's been very successful. It's not like what they've done has been proven to work now. It's not like how like Troy Weaver and the Pistons keep saying, oh, we know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. And it just isn't working. Like they've done what they've preached, and it works, and now continue to do it. And it's part of what they are now. It's, we're bringing the right guys. Taylor Decker said it today. Like, when you get drafted, give me, like, we want the right guys in our building here today. I don't want the fastest guy in the field. I don't want the most athletic. We want like gritty guys on this team. That's why I think it's interesting to see what they do in the first round, because there's going to be some players available that might be, we think that are the best players, and they think they have a whole different board.
Yeah. And I think when kind of, Jeff, to answer your question, like as far as a mock draft, like how can you kind of identify it? And I think it has to do with consistency and fundamentals. So you look at all the players that they've built around, the players that they drafted. Jared Goff, he's not the most talented quarterback, but he's very fundamental. Brian Branch, who they took, very fundamental. I'm not saying these players are just fundamental. Obviously, Brian Branch is very good. When you look at the root of the player they are, Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Aiden Hutchinson, Penei Sewell, all these players are very fundamental, which means they're consistent. And I think Brad Holmes, he remembers working at Hertz rental car for the Atlanta Hawks, and he knows that you do not get this opportunity once. So he's not going to waste this opportunity on the Kayvon Thibodeaux, who are very flashy, that look like they could be great fits. When you really get down to the person that they are, they're not a Jack Campbell. Like if they're not that consistent player that's very fundamental as a human being and a player, you're not disciplined, they don't have that time for you. So when you look at that, that's why I think Darius Robinson's, those type of players, when you look at them, it's like, yeah, they're not the flashiest player, but are they fundamentally sound? Are they disciplined human beings? I think that's what they look at, because they don't want to invest their money on some high flashy pick. I think the only one that really hasn't fit that mold is Jameson Williams, but you can see that he's not a guy that just takes plays off. Like when he's on the field, he's a gritty type of wide receiver. He's not the biggest wide receiver, but he has a very high motor, and that leads to consistency. So that's, I think, the biggest thing for them.
And it's not like, I love this comment, because it speaks to kind of the way, the angle I'm taking on this. Streams only. Talent and culture can coexist. It doesn't mean just because they're finding the right players, they're passing on talented players. Like Jahmyr Gibbs, talented. Jack Campbell, talented. Sam Laporta, talented. Brian Branch, talented. Amon-Ra St. Brown, talented. But it seems like there's this common theme where, and it's a side thing. It's a little side thing I noticed. They're not really on social media. Like that's not really something they're prioritizing. Like Jack Campbell, don't give a damn about no social media. Like he's all about ball. Sam Laporta, same way. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the same way. Jared Goff, same way. Like these guys aren't. It seemed like when they got CJ Gardner-Johnson, it was kind of like, this is different. Like Kirby Joseph he's the guy that's on social media, but he does love the game, obviously. But for the most part, like a lot of these guys are just all about ball. That's all they're focused on, and that's what you look for. They find players that love football, they stay in shape, they take the game serious, they respect the sport, they respect the grind, and they just want to win. And like you said, Lucas, they're fundamentally sound. That's what matters the most. And look at a lot of these players, they're just so fundamental. I mean, like the guys I brought up, the guys you brought up, that's really the common theme here. And no, what's up, Boone? It's you see it. With
I just think like it's just football guys. Like that's what it comes down to. It's just we want football guys. Like that's all it is. I think it's like it could almost be that simple, because football guys, like at the end of the day, they just love the game. Like Lucas probably knows this, like being a football guy, I'm sure like you just love the game. You don't care about anything else but that. And that's like the guys they look for. And there are guys who you might say like those are football guys, and they're really not. And you have to kind of break that down and figure out whether they're not. But like today in those press conferences, again, another question was asked, and it was Taylor Decker that was like, they were asking him like, what type of guys do you want in here? He was talking about Kevin Zeitler. And they were like, what type of player is he? And he's like, to be honest, He's an old school football guy, and he just loves football. And he's not like one of these big time athletic dudes or anything that you would want out of a big time guard, but he's just a football dude. And I think that's when like Brian Branch, football guy, Jack Campbell, football guy, Jahmyr Gibbs, football guy. And I think that's just what it comes down to. We don't care like what the stats are. We don't care what all this is we want the right players in here that can play football and they know what they're doing and they're all in on this. Because when you get guys that are all in, you're going to win a lot of football games, especially if they do end up having talent and they have talent. You're going to win a lot of football games.